My name is Jessica Ellington, and I'm not a preacher, not a prophet, not someone who's ever tried to be in the spotlight. I'm just a mother. A mother whose entire world flipped upside down on May 4, 2019, when my daughter Emma died right in front of a crowded auditorium. And somehow came back with a message so heavy, so powerful, it shook us to the core. I never imagined I'd be the one telling a story like this. But once you hear what Emma saw, what she was told, and why she came back, you'll understand why I couldn't stay silent. This isn't just a story about a girl who almost died. It's about what she saw while she was gone, and the terrifying truth Jesus told her about what's happening to our world. That day started like any other. The sun was pouring through the window as I packed Emma's lunch. It was the day of the school's spring play, and she was so proud of her role. She was playing an angel named Mercy. She floated into the kitchen in her little white robe with silver trim and spun around in the sunlight. She smiled at me and asked, "Do I look like I belong in heaven?" I laughed and told her yes, not realizing those words would come back to haunt me hours later. We sang worship music in the car on the way to school, and somewhere between a song and a red light, she asked me, "Mom, do angels ever get sad?" I told her I didn't know. I had no idea that would be the last innocent question she ever asked me. Emma took the stage later that morning, dressed as a little angel with wings her grandma had sewn for her. Her part was about forgiveness. She'd even added some of her own lines, saying that love never dies. The room was full of parents, students, teachers. All of us watching proudly, phones in hand. But halfway through her scene, something strange happened. She paused. She looked up, straight into the lights above her, and for a second she looked, not scared, but like she was hearing something the rest of us couldn't. Then she fell straight backward, hitting the floor so hard it echoed through the gym. Everyone froze. It was so quiet you could hear someone gasp. I remember one dad saying, "Is this part of the play?" before a teacher screamed. The curtains closed. Paramedics rushed in. My heart didn't just drop. It shattered. They rushed her to Franklin General Hospital. I barely remember the drive, only that my hands were shaking so badly I could hardly grip the wheel. When I arrived, they were still working on her. Tubes. Machines. Words I couldn't understand. One nurse blocked the doorway and said I had to wait. So I pressed my face to the wall outside the ICU and whispered the same prayer over and over again. "Please God, please. Don't take her." I don't know how long I was there before I heard shouting from inside. Then a nurse burst through the door yelling, "She's back. We have a pulse." I thought that would be the end of the nightmare. But when I walked into that room, and Emma looked up at me with eyes that didn't look like Emma's anymore, I knew something was different. She reached out with her trembling hand and whispered, "Mom, he said the children are crying in the dark." At first, I thought maybe she was confused, disoriented from everything. But the way she said it, slow, almost like she didn't even mean to speak it aloud, it stopped me cold. "The children are crying in the dark," she repeated, but softer, as if she wasn't talking about this world at all. I sat beside her and held her hand, and her eyes never left mine. There was something in them I can't explain. Not fear. Not pain. Something deeper, like she had looked into forever and it had looked back. Even the doctors said her vitals were a miracle. But what came out of her mouth in the days that followed made me realize Emma hadn't just survived something. She had crossed into something else entirely. Later that evening, once they'd taken out some of the tubes and she could speak clearly, she asked me a question that made my stomach twist. "Mom," she said, "was I gone?" I tried to play it off, told her she'd just fainted and everything was okay now. But she shook her head gently. "No, Mom. I saw you. Driving. Crying. I saw Dad, at his desk at work. He didn't even know yet. But I saw him crying too." I didn't know what to say. She described things she had no way of knowing. What I was wearing. What the nurse had said before I arrived. How the teacher had dropped to her knees beside her body on the stage, whispering, "Please stay with us." But Emma wasn't scared when she told me. She was calm, peaceful. And then she said, "It didn't hurt. I wasn't falling. I was floating." She described the moment her soul left her body as if her skin had become too tight, like a coat she didn't need anymore. She said it was like her whole being unzipped and she rose above her body, but everything still felt close, just quieter. She could see everyone around her. She could hear the ambulance siren but said it was muffled, like it was behind glass. Then she said something pulled her. Not by force, but with purpose. She described it like a current in the air, a vibration pulling her upward. She called it a seam in the sky, a rip in what we call reality. And when she passed through it, she said it wasn't dark. It was deep, like stepping through the surface of a dream where everything was made of feeling, light, and sound. Time didn't stop, she told me. It bowed. When she said that, I knew she hadn't just dreamed this. She hadn't made it up. Emma started to cry quietly, but not from fear. It was beautiful, she said. But before it was beautiful, it was quiet. So quiet it felt like something was missing. I asked her what she meant, and she hesitated, gripping her blanket. She said she passed through a place before she saw Jesus, a place she called the silence. She was careful to explain that it wasn't hell, not the way people think. It wasn't fire. It wasn't screams of torture. It was empty, like a world that had forgotten how to speak. A place where no one had ever said a prayer. And in that quiet, she heard something. Not with her ears, but inside her soul. It was children, she whispered, crying. Not in pain, in confusion. They didn't know where they were. They weren't bad, just forgotten. I asked her what she meant by forgotten, and she told me something that chilled me. They were never prayed for, she said. Not by anyone. Emma said it like she had been given a truth too heavy for someone her age to carry. She told me the children weren't screaming in pain. They were just lost, floating in a place where no one had ever told them they mattered, where no light had ever been sent to find them. They're waiting, Mom, she said, waiting for someone to remember them. I couldn't understand how or why she would even think something like that. But the way she said it, like she had heard it directly from someone who knew, made my skin crawl. Then she paused and told me that's when she called out. Not with her voice, but with her heart. And the moment she did, everything changed. She said it was like the silence cracked. A beam of light, bright and alive, broke through the stillness like lightning tearing through the sky. And that's when she saw him. She didn't say, a man, or even Jesus at first. She said, I saw the light remember me. She explained that before she even saw his face, she felt him, not like an idea or a story, but like someone who had always known her. She said, he didn't speak at first. He just was. The light wrapped around her, and she realized she wasn't alone anymore. He knew everything about her. Not just her name, but her thoughts, her prayers, even the time she'd cried into her pillow and never told anyone why. He held it all like it was treasure, she told me. Like I was worth remembering. When she finally saw him clearly, she told me it wasn't like the pictures in church. He didn't glow in the way people think. His face didn't stay the same. It changed depending on what he was feeling, and somehow she could feel what he felt. He looked like joy, she whispered. But not the kind of joy we know. The kind that makes stars exist. His robe shimmered, not with color but with memories. Hers, others, moments of love stitched into eternity. His eyes weren't just looking at her. They were reading her. Not to judge me, she said, but to love me fully. And then as she stood there before him, overwhelmed and shaking, he said her name. Emma, he whispered. And when he did, the entire space echoed like the word itself had been waiting to be said since the beginning of time. She told me that when he spoke her name, she didn't feel small or scared. She felt whole, seen, loved in a way that filled every empty place she never knew she had. But then came the part that made her cry the most. She said she looked down and realized she didn't have a body. Not in the normal way. She was light. Music. A shape made of song. And when she reached out to touch him, she hesitated. I didn't feel worthy, she said, tears falling down her cheeks. But before I could even take a breath, he stepped toward me and took my hand. He looked at her and said, "You're not here because you earned it. You're here because I love you." That has always been enough. When she said that out loud, I had to leave the room. I broke down in the hallway. When I came back into the room, Emma was staring out the window like she wasn't really looking at the trees or sky, but something beyond it. I asked her what else she saw, and she took a deep breath and said, "He showed me the world, but not like we see it." She described it as a glowing map, not of land or cities, but of souls. A living web of light and shadow. Jesus took her to what she called a place above it all, and from there she could see the earth, not physically, but spiritually. She said every act of kindness looked like a spark. Every prayer looked like a golden thread shooting upward. But there were dark places too. Not evil, just heavy. Places where people had stopped praying. Places where love had been forgotten. She said, "The earth isn't evil, Mom. It's hurting. It's tired." Jesus showed her that our prayers don't disappear. They live. And our cruelty, even the smallest act, leaves scars. She saw kids in those darker places glowing like candles in the night. Kids who felt out of place, too sensitive, too emotional, too quiet, the ones who cry without knowing why. They're the ones who remember heaven, she said. Even if they don't know it. Jesus called them light bearers. Children who are born not to fit in, but to remind the world what heaven feels like. But then she paused and looked at me, eyes filled with fear. He said if the world silences them, it silences its last line of defense. That line hasn't left my mind since. Emma saw parents too. People like me. He showed her homes where parents used to pray but now just scroll on their phones. Dinner tables where silence speaks louder than words. Parents are the first prophets their children ever hear, Jesus said to her. If they stop speaking life, the world speaks lies. Emma told me that broke his heart more than anything else. Not the violence, not the mistakes, the disconnection. She said Jesus showed her how even good families can raise spiritually starving children without knowing it. We teach them how to succeed, how to behave, how to win, but not how to stand in the light. If you don't tell them who they are, Jesus said, the world will tell them who they are not. That was the warning. But he didn't stop there. He showed her that it only takes one parent who prays over their child at night. One prayer whispered in a quiet kitchen. One moment of faith to shift the course of someone's entire life. Even if you miss the mark, he said, if you love them in my name, I will cover what you missed. Emma held my hand as she told me that and begged, "Please, Mom, tell the parents. Tell them their love still reaches heaven." I nodded through tears, knowing that I would. That I had to. Because this wasn't just for me. Or her. This was for anyone who's ever felt like their quiet prayers didn't matter. Jesus made it clear they do. Every single one of them does. Then her voice got quieter, like she was afraid to keep going. Her hands started trembling a little, and she stared at the blanket pulled over her lap. I asked if she wanted to stop, but she shook her head. "There's more," she whispered. "But it's the part one didn't want to remember." She said after Jesus showed her the children, the light bearers, and the pain of forgotten love, he took her somewhere else. Not heaven. Not hell. But what she called the in-between. It was a place for souls who didn't believe they mattered. She said they weren't being punished. They were empty. They had spent their entire lives chasing things that didn't follow them there. Fame. Status. Approval. Money. But now, in that space, none of it meant anything. She heard them crying. But not like wailing or terror. It was deeper. Sadder. Like the sound of regret echoing in silence. Emma said their cries were filled with a question. Was any of it real? They weren't angry. They were lost. And Jesus wept when he showed her that place. She said it broke him, not because they had sinned, but because they had never believed they were loved. I asked her, could they be saved? And she said Jesus looked at her and replied, love never forgets. As long as one person prays for them, there is still hope. That's why, she said, prayer matters more than anything. Some people, she told me, are hanging on by the thin thread of someone else's faith. Then Emma told me about something I still don't fully understand. Jesus showed her something she called the wheel. A structure spinning in layers, not just forward, but in all directions. She realized it was time. Not clocks or calendars, but the spiritual weight of time. She said past, present and future were all there, like stacked rivers flowing in different directions. And he told her something that sent chills down my spine. Time is not your enemy, he said. It is your teacher. Emma saw her life, not just what happened, but what could have happened. She saw what would have happened if she stopped praying. She saw what would have happened if I hadn't whispered her name when I was standing in that hallway, begging God to bring her back. She asked Jesus, which one is the real future? And he smiled, gently, and said, the one you align your heart with in faith. Emma realized that the future isn't something we just arrive at. It's something we shape, with our belief, with our love, with our prayers. She saw prayers that hadn't been answered yet. Not because God didn't hear, but because the people praying had given up too soon. Some miracles, he said, are already on the way. But people stop watching the road before they arrive. She begged me to remember that. To never stop praying. Never stop hoping. Never stop trusting that God was still writing the story. Emma told me she didn't want to come back. That was the hardest part to hear as her mother. She said it wasn't that she didn't love us. She did. But the peace, the warmth, the love she felt in his presence. It was like being home for the very first time. I wasn't tired, she said. I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I just didn't want to leave him. But Jesus took her hands, looked into her eyes, the same way he did when he first said her name, and told her, you have seen. Now you must speak. She told him. But who will believe me? I'm just a kid. And he replied, that's why they'll believe you. The world has heard too many voices with pride. They need one with only truth. He showed her a glimpse of what was ahead. Emma said she saw herself standing in front of people, not famous, but urgent, like a fire had been placed inside her. And I think that fire's already burning, she told me. She begged Jesus to let her stay, and he held her close, kissed the top of her head like a father would, and said, you were born for this. Go back. Wake the world up. And just like that, she was falling, back through the light, back through the layers of time, back into her broken body where pain waited like a slammed door. When she opened her eyes in the hospital, the doctors and nurses stared in disbelief. And the first words out of her mouth weren't, where am I? Or what happened? They were, the veil is real and we have so little time. Since that day, Emma hasn't been the same. She still laughs, still listens to music, still does her homework. But there's something in her now that wasn't there before. A stillness. A wait. Her teachers say she writes with a voice far older than her age. She says the angels are loudest at 3:33 a.m., and sometimes I find her sitting at the edge of her bed, praying for people she's never met. One time in church, she turned to our pastor and said, there's someone in the back row praying for healing in their spine. That man came forward in tears. He'd never told anyone, not even his wife. She didn't take credit. She just said, Jesus still remembers him. And when she prays, it's like heaven leans in to listen. Emma told me once, it's not for showing off, Mom. It's for calling people home. And now I'm keeping my promise. I told God if he brought my daughter back, I would share her story with the world. And here I am. Maybe this story reached you because you've been feeling forgotten. Maybe you've stopped praying. Maybe you're the parent who's tired. The teenager who feels invisible. Or maybe, you're walking too close to the edge. Emma came back from death to tell you. You are seen. You are loved. Heaven is listening. And it's not too late. If this story touched something inside you, if it made you cry, made you think, made you pray, then don't leave here quietly. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video. Tell someone else they're not alone. And if you have a story like this, if you've seen behind the veil too, we want to hear from you. Because heaven isn't just a place we go. It's a voice calling all of us home. One soul, one prayer, one story at a time.